Some people don't argue when they're hurt. They don't raise their voice. They don't try to explain what they're feeling. They just get quiet. And the strange part is, you don't even notice it happening at first. Everything still looks normal. They're still there, still replying, still showing up. But something has already changed. Because people like this don't leave suddenly. They don't make dramatic exits. They leave slowly, in ways you can't see. A little less energy in their voice. A little more silence in conversations. A little less of them each time you meet. Until one day, you realize you don't really have them anymore. And by then, they've already made that decision. Not in that moment, but long before you ever thought to ask, is something wrong? Now here's the part most people never understand. They didn't go quiet because they stopped caring. They went quiet. Because at some point, caring stopped feeling safe. If this already feels a little too real, take a second and subscribe to Mind and Body Hub. Because what you're about to understand next might explain more than you expect. The reason this happens is not what most people think. It's not attitude, it's not ego, and it's definitely not indifference. It usually starts much earlier than that. Somewhere along the way, they learn something very specific. That expressing how they feel doesn't always end well. Maybe they tried to explain themselves once and got ignored, or worse, misunderstood. So instead of feeling heard, they felt exposed. And when that happens enough times, your mind adapts. Not loudly, not all at once, just quietly, in the background. It starts associating vulnerability with risk. Opening up doesn't feel natural anymore. It feels dangerous. So instead of reacting, you begin to hold things in. You tell yourself it's not worth it. I'll deal with it myself. And at first, it feels like control. Like you're being mature. Like you're avoiding unnecessary conflict. But over time, that habit turns into something else. You stop explaining small things, then bigger things, then eventually everything. And the outside world doesn't notice. Because you still function, you still talk, you still show up when you're needed. But internally, you're doing something very different. You're observing more, speaking less. You're feeling everything, but sharing almost nothing. And that creates a gap. Not a loud one, not obvious, but a quiet distance between you and everyone else. And here's where it gets complicated. Because it doesn't feel like you're pushing people away. It feels like you're protecting something. Your energy, your peace, your sense of being understood. So instead of trying to fix every disconnect, you slowly step back from it. Not to hurt anyone, not to prove a point, just to avoid that feeling of being unseen again. And this is exactly why people like this don't explode when they're hurt. They don't argue. They don't fight. They just withdraw. Because in their mind, silence feels safer than saying something that might not matter. Let me show you what this actually looks like in real life. It's usually not a big argument, not some dramatic moment. It's something small. So small, most people don't even remember it later. You're sitting with someone, maybe a friend, maybe someone you care about. The conversation is normal, light, casual, nothing serious. And then they say something, not loudly, not aggressively, just a sentence. Something that hits a little deeper than it should. You pause for a second, but only internally. On the outside, you smile, you nod, you let the conversation continue like nothing happened. And to everyone else, it didn't. They move on, they forget it instantly. But you don't, because for you, it wasn't just a sentence. It was a signal. Something about that moment felt off, not enough to react, not enough to confront, but enough to remember. And that's where the shift begins. Not loudly, not in a way anyone can see, just quietly. You become slightly less open, a little more careful with what you say. Next time you talk, you hold back just a little. You think a bit more before you respond. You share less than you normally would. And no one questions it. Because from the outside, you still seem the same. But internally, you're already adjusting. Then it happens again. Another small moment, another thing that doesn't sit right. And again, you say nothing. You just store it. And over time, those small unspoken moments start adding up. Not into anger, but into distance. A distance that no one notices while it's happening. Because you're still there. Still replying, still showing up. But not in the same way. And not with the same openness. And slowly, without any announcement, you start becoming someone who is present, but no longer fully there. Now from the outside, this kind of silence is easy to misunderstand. It looks like distance, like disinterest, like they've stopped caring. But that's not what's happening. The truth is, it's usually the opposite. They didn't go quiet because they don't care. They went quiet because they cared too much in places where it didn't feel safe anymore. Because at some point, they realized something. That not everyone notices the small things. Not everyone pays attention to what's said and what's left unsaid. So instead of explaining every feeling, they start observing. They watch how you respond. They notice what you ignore. That they pay attention to how often they have to adjust just to keep things smooth. And slowly, they stop expecting you to understand. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. Because explaining yourself over and over again, just to feel seen, gets exhausting. And that's when the shift becomes permanent. They stop reacting in the moment. They stop pointing things out. They stop asking, "Did you notice that?" or "Do you understand how that felt?" Instead, they answer those questions for you, silently. And once that happens, something changes in the relationship. Not visibly, but fundamentally. Because now, they're no longer trying to fix the gap. They're learning how to live with it. And here's the part most people never realize. People like this don't leave suddenly. And they don't wake up one day and decide to walk away. They've been leaving, little by little, for a long time. Through every moment, they chose silence over explanation. Through every time they felt something and decided it wasn't worth saying. Through every small shift that went unnoticed. So by the time it finally shows on the surface, by the time they seem distant or disconnected, they're not deciding anymore. They already did. So if you recognize yourself in this, if you're someone who goes quiet, who pulls back instead of reacting, who chooses distance over conflict, understand this. There's nothing wrong with you. Your silence didn't come from nowhere. It was built from moments where speaking didn't feel safe, built from times when you tried, and it didn't go the way you expected. And at some point, your mind made a decision to protect you, not perfectly, not always in the best way, but in the only way it knew how. And that matters, because this isn't weakness, it's awareness. But here's the part you need to be honest about. There's a difference between protecting your peace and slowly isolating yourself. One helps you grow. The other keeps you stuck in a loop you don't even notice. So the goal isn't to stay quiet forever. The goal is to find people who don't make silence feel safer than speaking. People who don't need you to explain everything twice. People who notice even when you don't say a word. And if you're on the other side of this, if you've ever watched someone slowly become distant and didn't understand why, now you do. They weren't pulling away randomly. They were responding to something they didn't feel safe expressing. And sometimes, all it takes to change that is not a big gesture, not a dramatic conversation, just consistency, just presence, just being the kind of person they don't have to protect themselves from. Because for someone who has learned to stay quiet, feeling safe enough to speak again is not a small thing, it's everything. So before you assume someone has stopped caring, ask yourself something simple. Did they really disappear all at once? Or were they leaving in ways you just didn't notice? If this video put into words something you've been feeling for a long time, make sure you subscribe to the channel, Mind and Body Hub. Because sometimes, understanding yourself is the first step to feeling connected again. And if you stay till the end, there's a good chance you're not as alone as you think.